Hello, welcome to Best of the Best, Playing with Power series where we rate the top cards, decks, sets, and much more from a CEDH perspective. Today we are going to explore Innistrad Midnight Hunt. This new set is the third time we have visited the plane of Innistrad. This set brings back some of the old mechanics like Transform and Flashback, but it's also filled with new mechanics that will surely have you brewing fun new decks. So first up, let's talk about Innistrad. The original Innistrad was released September 30th, 2011. We saw cards like Liliana of the Veil, Laboratory Maniac, Past in Flames, Snapcaster Mage, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Blasphemous Act, Delver of Secrets, and the Checking Tap lands, to name a few. Yes, all those cards were printed in that set. Imagine the standard environment at the time. It was outrageous. We also saw some new mechanics and keywords like Curses, Fight, Morbid, and the now commonly used Transform mechanic. It was quite a time to be playing Magic. In general, Innistrad is often considered one of the best sets in Magic's history. There was an interview in 2019 where Mark Rosewater said that Innistrad was one of the tightest sets that he has ever designed. In 2019, Louis Scott Vargas and Marshall Sutcliffe both ranked Innistrad as the best draft format ever, according to a Limited Resources podcast. Some things that we saw in Innistrad really guided Magic to its current state today. There were so many great cards in the set. We saw that it was going to change the way Eternal formats were played forever. April 8th, 2016, we saw the second iteration of Innistrad, Shadows over Innistrad. This gave us cards like Cryptolith Rite, Tireless Tracker, Seasons Past, and in terms of CEDH, we saw the introduction of the Gitrog monster. As you probably know, Gitrog would end up having long-lasting impacts into what we consider CEDH to this day. The new mechanics introduced were Delirium, Investigate, and Skulk. We saw the return of Madness as a mechanic and Transform from the original Innistrad block. An honorable mention, as well as meme favorite, is Triskadekaphile. This brings us to Innistrad Midnight Hunt. This set brings back Transform, Flashback, and Investigate. Now, let's go over some of the new mechanics. The first mechanic is Day and Night. When the game starts, it's neither day nor night. In most games, it will become day first. The most common way for this to happen is a permanent with Daybound enters the battlefield. In some cases, it may become night first because of a permanent with Nightbound entering the battlefield. Once it's day or night, the game will be exactly one of those designations, with day or night going back and forth until the game ends. It can never return to being neither, and the whole game is either day or night. Additionally, this is a global effect, it's not per player. The second mechanic is Disturb. Spells with Disturb can be cast from the graveyard transformed for their Disturbed cost. This is very impactful, and we're going to talk about what that means for CEDH in just a bit. To summarize, it allows the ability to cast cards from your graveyard, much like the Aftermath mechanics we saw in Amonkhet. The third new mechanic is Coven. Coven provides an effect or an ability if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers. Some Coven abilities are triggered, and some are activated. The final mechanic is Decay. Decay creatures can't block. When they attack, they're sacrificed at the end of combat. And now, let's dive into our list. Our first card is Sigardian Savior. Sigardian Savior is 2 and 2 white for a 3/3 flying angel. It has, when Sigardian Savior enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return up to 2 target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card is relevant because it scales a bit differently than you might initially think. A lot of people will look at the mana value and think this is an overcosted 3/3 flyer. In reality, it's a 5 mana have 3 creatures card, and one of them happens to be a 3/3 flyer, which isn't irrelevant. When you're evaluating this card, there's one thing that you should think about. If you cast Guardian Savior, you'll also get things like Dockside Extortionist, Serra Ascendant, Drannith Magistrate, and so on. There are so many creatures in our format with a mana value or 2 or less that have very powerful effects. Getting 2 of them back is a great recovery play. You can also send your creatures directly to the graveyard with things like Entomb, Unmarked Grave, Buried Alive, and so on. Next up on our list is Consider. Consider is 1 blue for an instant that reads, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard, draw a card. Consider is a great replacement for decks running things like Serum Visions or Opt. Putting cards into your graveyard is really strong in our format. It's at instant speed, which really pushes it to a place that you could play this in some CEDH decks. We could definitely see this in decks that leverage graveyards like Underworld Breach. Overall great design, and we will see how it plays out. Next, we have Triskadekaphile. Triskadekaphile is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human wizard. It reads, you have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. It also has pay 3 and a blue, draw a card. This is a throwback to Triskadekaphobia, which came out in Shadows over Innistrad. At first glance, this might seem like a joke card. Triskadekaphile, however, is actually pretty good. It can be paired with Necropotence to win the game during your next upkeep. If you really want to get spicy, you don't necessarily need to win on your next turn. You can just start your turn with 30 cards in hand. The fact that you have no maximum hand size means that with Necropotence, you can pass with as many cards in your hand as your life total will allow. Also, if you're on a control list, this means that you'll likely get to your next turn and be able to have interaction. It's also an infinite mana sink to draw your library. The fact that it's an alternate win condition in your deck is something that will come up more often than people think. Next up, we have Cathar Commando. Cathar Commando is 1 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier. It has flash and reads, pay 1 and sacrifice Cathar Commando. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. At first you might be thinking that this is just draft chaff that doesn't belong on our end of the Commander format. But give it a closer look. This card does everything you want it to do in white. Having artifact or enchant removal in white is really relevant right now in the meta. You don't see very much of it in this color, which is ironic because it's one of the best colors at doing it. Additionally, it's a creature. It slides right under things like Deafening Silence. Also, this card allows you to block at instant speed, then sacrifice it to get rid of an enchantment or artifact. Number 3 on our list today is Fading Hope. Fading Hope is 1 blue for an instant that reads, return target creature to its owner's hand. If its mana value was 3 or less, scry 1. This is another strong, versatile card that can go infinite with Dockside and Lord Drakus. It can target any creature on the battlefield, not just your own. Cast Gilded Drake, snatch an opponent's creature, then cast Fading Hope, get it back, and still scry 1. With all of the reliance on Dockside and bounce effects in this format, this card will see its share of play. It's no replacement for things like Chain of Vapor, but it's going to replace some of the other less valuable bounce spells currently seeing play in CEDH. Our runner-up on today's list is Geistwave. Geistwave is 1 and a blue for an instant that reads, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you controlled that permanent, draw a card. If you thought Fading Hope was good, Geistwave is bananas. The versatility of bounce in this format is huge. Being able to bounce a non-land permanent instead of just a creature, enchantment, or artifact is great, but the implications are fantastic. Similar to the last card we talked about, Geistwave can go infinite with Lord Drakus and Dockside. What's more, you can propose a win that's completely commander agnostic. There are some fun strategies you could devise with Krark, or some other things that like to copy spells. There is just so much potential with this card. Be on the lookout for it at your table soon. And finally, our number 1 card for Innistrad Midnight Hunt is Malevolent Hermit. Malevolent Hermit is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard. It reads, pay 1 blue and sacrifice it. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. It also has a disturb cost of 2 and a blue. When casting it for its disturb cost, it will enter transformed as Benevolent Geist. Benevolent Geist is a 2/2 spirit wizard with flying that reads, non-creature spells you control can't be countered. And if Benevolent Geist would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. When analyzing this card, it's important to realize a few things. First, the front side is not irrelevant. At worst, it's a well-rounded miscast, which is very playable. The disturb side is really what we are after though. To be able to make your non-creature spells uncounterable in blue is very powerful. There are little to no blue cards that you can make your spells uncounterable that currently see play in CEDH. It will make your Ad Nauseam, Peer into the Abyss, Underworld Breach, Fast Mana, Tutors, Counterspells, and so much more nearly unstoppable. Another avenue to look at is at the implications surrounding things like Hermit Druid. Being able to mill your library, cast Benevolent Geist, and then make your Dread return uncounterable is a wonderful addition. Remember, this is a wizard, and we all know how much Inala was looking for a way to make her spells uncounterable. Also, it's a creature, and creatures dodge a lot of things in our format. Most counter magic nowadays doesn't hit creatures. It lets you get around things like Deafening Silence as well. Overall, this will become a staple for many decks. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Best of the Best. What did you think of the cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt? What cards did we leave out? Let us know in the comments below. You can also help us out by liking, sharing, subscribing, and also supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.